everyone! English literature 2. Oh my gosh. Oh, we got 6. Okay, like I said again, you can come to both. Now, the way this works, and I try to explain it, is as long as you are present at least one class in body, then you don't have to do any extra work. But you do have to watch the video. Okay, so, and remember, we just go on the stats and it tells you exactly who watched it and how long they watched it. And, I mean, I guess if you're naughty, you can push play and just walk away or something. I mean, you know, there's no way to supervise that. But we do need you to watch, and especially like if you weren't here today, make sure you watch the Tuesday thing before you come Thursday, or we'll be lost. Okay, and what I sent in the email is that I'm gonna sort of take attendance. Oh, come on in. Hey there, Amelia. I was gonna say Forbow, but you have a married name now, don't you?
Forbow still, but yeah, Wolf.
Okay, you still okay, but it's so exciting. I saw the beautiful pictures on Facebook.
Thanks.
And if you all know Amelia, so and the wedding was how many months ago?
It was a little over a year.
It had been a year now. Okay,
Yeah.
it's exciting. Did you guys get to go anywhere fun for your honeymoon?
Went to Paris.
You went to Paris. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good stuff. So did you get to do anything for your 1 year anniversary?
Not
You just
really.
sat in the room and looked at each other.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, let's order out something really fancy. You know, it's like, what are we going to do? But that's exciting. So excited. So I was just getting started, so the way it works is, you do need to either come or watch every video. Right now, I'll be taking attendance every Friday at 11:59. I'll basically wait till midnight on Friday. That's when I'll go and check and put the attendance in. Right, and again, you have to either come in class or watch the video. But if you can't come to class, like you've chosen to be 100% remote or whatever, then, like I said, each week I'll send you a few questions, and then you need to email me back with like a paragraph. It doesn't be long, 3, and I'm not really grading that. It's just to show that you watch the video and you are engaged, right? And I would encourage you to look at those questions anyway, even if you're here, because, I'll think about them. And I mean, basically what I'll probably do for your midterm is I will give you quotes to identify, but I'm just going to tell you, this is Blake so-and-so, and just let you go at it, okay? And you probably know that at first I thought the midterm would be in class, but actually midterm and final both have to be online, and you're going to email me your papers. And we'll talk about it when it gets closer, but all of that is in your hand, your syllabus. And I sent you my little addendum, okay? I changed my office hours around. It seemed kind of silly to be here Monday because there don't have any classes on Monday. So I'll be right after this. I'll go to my office. You have questions, and then I put there, and it's true. Okay, I want to be accessible as much as I can. So 24/7. You can email me, or you can call my cell phone, or you can text my cell phone. Okay, and I put in there that when I go to sleep, I shut my cell phone off, and when I'm in class, you're not going to bother anybody. And so I don't know if you're just about to explode, you can leave a message at 2 in the morning or something. Actually, I might be awake at 2 in the morning, but if you leave a message at 9 in the morning, I'll be asleep. And I will get back to you. I mean, you know that I've had most of you. I will get back to you as soon as possible and try to keep things going. I can't believe there's going to be no class on Wednesday and Thursday now. You saw that? Did you get that about the hurricane? So I don't know what I'm going to do. Rather than sit in front of Panopto, I might just, I think what I'll do is tape a shorter lecture on a few poems on my phone and put it on YouTube and then send you the link. If I'm going to do all that work, I might as well put it on YouTube so maybe somebody else can benefit. I'll just do that. What's that?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Sorry for interrupting you. What if our power goes out?
Oh. I mean, I guess just tell me or something. I mean, I can go back and change you from absent to present if something like that happens.
Okay.
I can go back and do it again. But we'll try and just to keep up. And again, it's so important, not just for my classes. And that's why, I fully understand why these are not live feed. We just don't have the bandwidth. But it bothers me because it's going to knock you guys off schedule. Like if you decide not to come Thursday, like I said, you can come Thursday, but if you don't come Thursday, it's going to knock you off schedule. So I would encourage you, to do as much. Come on in. I don't think so. This is English literature too. Oh, no, is it like a cinema arts class?
Art history.
Yeah, it got moved to 122. Just go down the hall around the corner.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm so glad this happened. There's somebody in 122 that has a class there at 2, and then they were going to have this class at 3:30, and I was going to be here at 2 and over there. And we changed it so we're not moving the stuff all over the place. It was a lot easier. It reminds me, I'll tell you one joke, and then we have to get started. It reminds me of the story of a man who died, and he died in a blue suit. But he had always wanted to be buried in a brown suit. Right? And so the family went to the undertaker and said, can you change him from a blue suit to a brown suit? And he said, I don't know, that's a really difficult kind of thing to do. It's going to cost you, about $1,000. And they're like, oh, well, we can't afford that. Just go ahead and bury him in the blue suit. And then it came time for the funeral, an open casket, and they went, and sure enough, he was in a brown suit. And they said, sir, we told you we can't afford this. Why didn't you do this? He said, no, don't worry. It's only going to cost you $29.99. Well, why is it so cheap? Well, it turns out in the other funeral home, there was a guy who died in a brown suit, but wanted to be buried in a blue suit. So we just changed the heads. I don't even know where I heard that joke. Anyway, very gruesome. Anyway, I'm kind of feeling gruesome. You all got that? Oh, man. Oh, I did want to tell you, I think you all got that. You're all very good. Most of you had me before know that my chemical allergies are horrendous. So please don't put on any scented hand sanitizer. But if you really, really need sanitizer, each time I come, I do have organic, scent-free. Also, this stuff is fine. This is scent-free. You can use that. And also, I'll try to bring this each time. One of my friends told me about this. You buy a spray bottle, and you fill it with hydrogen peroxide. And if you spray this on a doorknob or anything, it will kill everything. Don't spray it in your face. But it will kill anything. So I'll try to bring this each time. I want to give you, an alternative. It's I got something on my hands. Just grab one of these. I guess you could put this on your hand, too. Has anybody put these on your hands yet? But this is supposed to be a completely organic sort of thing. Somebody told me that it's you use water and electricity and salt or something?
That's what they told us on the coronavirus town hall.
Yeah. Isn't that what it is? It's water and stuff? Electricity, yeah. So you can use that too.
Water, no less, is what I heard.
Say it again, water?
Distilled water.
Oh, that's right, distilled water. There we go. That's pretty cool. So you can use that too, actually. Maybe that's fine. Anybody brave enough? Did anybody spray it on their hands yet?
No, we used it all weekend for check-ins at Photo, and there's no problem, but I just wouldn't. It's not for human use.
Oh, it really isn't for, okay, it's more for cleaning things and all.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll bring that too then.
Spray Windex on your hands.
Oh, I guess that's true, okay. So somebody was saying she put it and made her hands feel all tingly. Maybe it's the electricity. It's kind of cool stuff, so. Oh, brave new world that hath such creatures in it. What Shakespeare play does that come from? The Tempest, very good. It is the Tempest. Very good. Who says it?
I said it.
You said you.
Yeah. But who says it in the book? I do.
That's right.
I don't know, I could guess, but
You know?
it feels like it might be Miranda.
Ah, very good. And Miranda says it when she sees Fernando and others. It's like, oh, I've never seen a man except her father. I've never seen a young man before and stuff like that. So anyway, pretty cool stuff. Okay. Wow. Did I get everybody? That's crazy. Let me put that in there. Okay. Wolf. So is your husband German?
Yes.
That's pretty cool. Is he a wolf? Watch out when the moon is full. Okay. So what does he do?
He is a software developer.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Okay. So again, just go over. I've got the addendum, all that sort of stuff, and we'll just figure this out. And we're already going to get a day off next Thursday because I was supposed to speak in what's that place called, Branson, Missouri, and it got canceled in March. And they already paid my ticket, so I felt kind of obligated. So I'm going to be doing it now. I just hope that doesn't get canceled too. We'll see, but I'll keep you up. But other than that, we'll have every class. Okay, what I want to do is, like I said, because it's just impossible to use the board with all of this, I'm just not going to. Normally I make you spend all this time going on rhyme scheme and meter and stuff. So we'll skip that opening lecture. Okay, I'll mention things like that as we go along. But let's go and really what I want to do, especially with this setup, it works much better with just an open book. So most of the time we'll have the book open, we'll read the poems, and we'll go very carefully over them. Right? And what I'm thinking about doing to try to make it a little easier for these poor people that have to watch the spaceman over here in his helmet is when I read the poem out loud, I think I'll maybe face them when I read it out loud or something. I'll try to look every so often. Again, I'm sure all your teachers are trying to figure this out too. And anyway, okay. So if you get your course pack out and look at page 6. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, page 6. There's an outline there that's called the eye of the beholder. So this will just kind of get us started, a little bit of background, and there's a little room there if you want to take notes in there, that's fine. And I want to go over that, and then, like I said, from then on we'll kind of dive in. And there are a few outlines in your course pack that we'll use every so often. Oh wow, I can actually write my nose with that. You all saw you didn't see my mask. I'll put it on later. It's the Lord of the Rings. For my wonderful children, got that for me. Lord of the Rings. What do you call them when they're in their 20s? I mean, they're still children. You're children. What do you call them? Right? Your parents still call you kids, right? You know. I guess you could say my son and daughter. I guess that sounds a little more.
I'm the youngest child. They call me everything.
They call you everything. Yep. Let the moon.
First one is baby of the family. Hate it.
Oh, that let the moon and stars light your way. It's cool. Be better for the Narnia. Oh, I kind of like that. The Narnia class I'm teaching. So, okay, now, when does Romanticism begin? Okay, now we're focused on Romanticism in England, of course, but there was a Romantic movement in Germany, there was a Romantic movement in France, and there would be a Romantic movement in America, though a little bit later. Right, it kind of moves. It sort of starts in France and Germany, then it moves to England, and then it moves to America. Do you know who you would refer to as a romantic in American literature? I mean, it's kind of odd, but you would actually group people like Hawthorne and Melville. We think of them as transcendentalists, but they're coming out of a romantic movement. And it's a little bit different as it goes across the pond, as we say. But they're still moving, and they're still very much influenced by the British Romantics, and it moves along. But if you want to choose one event that begins the Romantic age, it is the year 1789. What happened in 1789? Come on, why is that an important year? July of 1789. Come on, somebody must know.
The American Revolution.
That's a little bit earlier. That's 1776.
Constitution.
No? What happened in Europe in 1789? Come on, you must know that date. The French Revolution started. The storming of the Bastille. Do you still read Tale of Two Cities in high school? Well, the Jones girls read everything, right? I expect that. You don't read as fast as she does, do you?
Not quite.
Okay, I don't think anybody does, actually. Eliana, I guess you guys are kind of neck and neck on
You'd
there.
have to find a book we hadn't read to have us.
Oh my
like, try
gosh.
it, and now
Yeah,
we'll
that
get
would be
it
cool. You had to
back.
find a book and give you an hour, and then they will read a book during convocation. And they can probably still tell you what the convocation was about. I really like that. That's cool. I'm not a speed reader. Are you a speed reader, Sophia? No, I'm not a speed reader.
Writer, though.
Oh, well, that's good. That's handy. Right? So anyway, it starts in July, right, of 1789 with the storming of the Bastille, right? Now, if you've studied this in school, you probably know that there were actually like not even a dozen prisoners in the Bastille at the time. But it was a big deal because the Bastille was more of the kind of prison where you might send political enemies, right? It wasn't just for like criminals of the, I stole something. I mean, it was something that had a link to the old system and, bad aristocrats and locking up their enemies and things like that. And it was pretty much bloodless. They all came up with their pitchforks and came in and they won. It was pretty much a bloodless kind of thing. Now, what's amazing about France is that in 1789, France was still a little bit in the feudal age. I mean, it was of all the other major cities in Europe or major countries in Europe, it was the most, aristocrats and peasants and stuff like that. It was the most separated. The aristocrats had the most control. The kings had, still had quite a bit of, much more than like George III in England. Again, they were still a little bit more snooty, didn't treat the peasants well. What's odd, though, about the French Revolution is it didn't start with peasants. It actually started with, like, the upper middle class and then moved its way down, right? And it went through all sorts of different phases. But it began with the storming of the Bastille. And what was wonderful about that is they stormed in there and they won, right? I mean, there wasn't a bloodbath. They really, again, it was more of a moral victory than anything. But in the shadow of the storming of the Bastille, which the French still celebrate as their sort of Independence Day, July, I forgot what it is, 13th, I think. That's or July 11th, I forgot. They still celebrate that every year with the fireworks and things like that. And what it seemed to say was that, hey, wait a minute. If I want to be free, all I have to do is stand up and shake off my chains and be free. It seemed like anything was possible. Right? It seemed like it was the dawning of the age of, Maria knows old songs, the age of Aquarius, okay? The dawning of, it just seemed like everything had changed, and we weren't going to have to fight and be bloody and destroy everything. That we could just assert it, that if we dreamed it, we could just make it come true. Right? Now, some of you at least have heard the name Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Very, very influential, I would say mostly for the bad, but anyway, very, very influential. And he wrote a famous book that's still read, especially in political science classes, called The Social Contract. Did you read that?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't think we do that in honors, though. No, they do the other stuff. But
Yeah.
you did read some of it, okay? Does anybody know its famous opening line? Man is born free, but is everywhere in chains. Okay? And have you ever heard a phrase called the noble savage? What is the noble savage? Can you explain that?
Like the idea that before civilization and government, man was good because civilization and government are what leads him to sin.
Okay, good. So Rousseau was one of the people who essentially denied what really important Christian doctrine? Original sin. Okay, that we're not born depraved, we're born free, we're born good, but then we're corrupted by society. Now, the ironic thing about this, and G.K. Chesterton writes about this quite a bit, is that you would think what a wonderful, optimistic idea that we are by nature good, that we're not depraved, fallen, with a sinful nature, that none of that's true, no original sin. But actually, that denial of original sin and the belief that we're by nature good has actually led to much of the worst horrors in the last couple hundred years. Because what happens is, like the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution or the Cuban Revolution or the Chinese Revolution, you start thinking that man is by nature good, but he's corrupted by society. So, if we change society, if we educate everybody by some kind of public educational initiative and all of that sort of stuff, then we'll make a perfect society. Now, I wish that were true, but what often happened in a lot of these countries is there was a revolution and they wanted to change and they wanted to re-educate everybody. But there were certain people that were so corrupt you can't do anything about them. So if you're Hitler, those are the Jews. They're corrupt, you got to get rid of them. You got to get rid of the gypsies, you got to get rid of the Slavs. If you're the Soviets, the middle-class landowners, you got to get rid of them. If you're Chinese, the intellectuals, you got to get rid of them. Okay, you got to wipe these people out and start all over again. And again, it's really weird, but almost all of the attempts to build utopia in the last couple hundred years have led to terrible dystopias. Can anybody name a dystopian novel? You familiar with that phrase? Say it again.
Like the Hunger Games.
Good. Oh, good. I didn't think of the Hunger Games. Good example of a modern one. The Hunger Games. Good. 1984 is one. Brave New World. Okay. A lot of these things are. We set out. There's a famous one written by a Russian named We, which is interesting, by Yevgeny Zamyatin. Isn't that a cool name? But you're right. The Hunger Games, and actually, what was that other trilogy? Insurgent. Divergent, Insurgent. Yeah, that's another one. And actually, there's another trilogy. I don't know if it was a trilogy, that Maze Runner thing. I've caught those movies on cable. So. What's that?
The Giver Quartet was actually.
Oh, that's right. That is too. Yeah. And in fact, oddly, there seems to have been a huge uplift in dystopian novels, and most of them they seem to be based around teenagers who end up being programmed and given no freedom of will. It's kind of a strange thing. And I'm sorry, but they trouble me because when I watch them, it almost seems like the people are terrified of it and yet in a weird way attracted to it. Because it means I don't have to make any decisions in my life. They just tell me what to do. Right? The old Soviet Union had less need for therapists than we did, because we need a lot of therapists because we have all the choices in the world and then we screw them up. I remember watching an old movie where the girl said to her friend, I think we should go back to to arranged marriages. So why? And she said, well, this way, if you get married and you get divorced, you can at least blame your parents. Now you can only blame yourself for being so stupid. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Okay. But but again, in the beginning, in this dawn, this new world, it seemed like we could rebuild Eden. We could go back to a golden age. It seemed like anything was possible. Again, we could take our internal dreams and make them external in the world. We could make, or like the little kid at the end of the never-ending story. Did you ever see that or read that? Okay. Claire, you don't know the never-ending story? That's one of those books people say they've read 100 times or something, like The Princess Bride. Oh, anyway, I haven't read it. It's a really good movie, old movie called The Never-Ending, from the 80s, called Never-Ending Story. But, with imagination, we can build anything, right? We can build the whole world. So, again, and the people who were young then in England were all on the side of the revolution. They thought, this is great. And one of them, we'll be reading him in a few weeks, is William Wordsworth, a real, probably central romantic figure. He was born in 1770. So when the French Revolution started, he was about the age of most of you in this class, was 19 years old. And later on, he wrote a poetic autobiography called The Prelude. It's his autobiography, but it's written in poetry. And he remembered back, and I put it there, I think it's number 3, and number 4. He was trying to remember what it was like to be young in 17, and he said it this way: bliss was it in that dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heaven. It just seemed like anything was possible, right? Again, we don't have to fight. We just have to shake, and the chains will fall off, and we'll be free, and Europe will be free. And again, it's hard to get. I mean, every so often, what did they call it? There were times in the 20th century when they had, like in Egypt, where they just for a moment it seemed like it was going to be free, and a lot of the Christian Copts and some of the Muslims were like working, and then it just boom, it comes back down. You end up with the worst dictator. I mean, I'm glad we got rid of Saddam Hussein, but all they ended up doing is putting a worse dictator in there, right? So it's just it's scary. What's that place that you worked at? Moldova? What's it called?
Moldova.
Yeah. Moldova. I mean, we just see what happens, and it looks like we're going to build a utopia, and then it just gets worse. And what happens is, and this happened again in the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, is that they got rid of one tyrant and ended up with a tyrant that was 100 times worse, right? And that's what happened to the French Revolution. But in the beginning, especially if you were young, if you were 40, you didn't like it. But if you were a young poet, English major, right? You're like, this is great, okay? This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Anything's possible. Now, around the time of the French Revolution, there was a poet named William Blake, who's a little bit older than actually Wordsworth, and he wrote a series of poems, we'll be looking at them, called The Songs of Innocence. And these simple poems, they're written in the same kind of meter as like Mother Goose nursery rhymes, but they're deceptively simple. Didn't you hate that when you were a kid, though? When you read a nursery rhyme that didn't rhyme properly? It's like, I don't like that. Hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck 1, the next one down. No, 1 and down, I'm sorry. Do you remember when they make fun of what's that?
Down to run. The clock struck 1, down to run.
Oh, I haven't heard it that way. I've heard it, the clock struck 1, the mouse ran down.
I've heard it. They changed it for us and the mouse was done, so it would rhyme.
Oh, really? That's interesting. I didn't know. Well, that makes me feel better.
Nursery rhymes.
Does anybody remember when they make fun of this in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
Oh, it's that one, when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again.
Or so, well,
That doesn't rhyme.
it's the other one when he says,
Narnia,
no, it's
Narnia,
the other one. It's 1 second. When Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sits at Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil times will be over and done. And listen, that doesn't rhyme. Okay, but they're off rhymes, just like hymns have off rhymes too. It's kind of annoying. But anyway, so these poems that are so beautiful and deceptively simple, they celebrate a pastoral world. Okay, if you're at a Baptist church, you have a pastor. You know what the word pastor means, literally?
Shepherd.
It means shepherd, right? So a pastoral world is the countryside with the shepherd and the sheep, and people are playing on their pipes, and there's a sort of innocence and a closeness to nature, right? And everything is innocent, and the innocence of children is not crushed, but it's allowed to sort of blossom, and it helps the adults to be rejuvenated. All of his poems are like that. And the poems emphasize lots and lots of children and lots of lambs and sheep and things like that. And it's, again, it's a world of innocence restored. And I want you to think about that word, okay? What is the name of the fruit that Adam and Eve ate from? Good. Yeah, the fruit of the knowledge of good and of evil. Now, did you ever actually think about that? Right? Because it's like, no, wait a minute. If what they ate was the fruit of the knowledge of good and of evil, then that means they weren't really good before they ate it. What were they? They weren't good, they were ignorant, but they were innocent. Okay? So, and think about this as the songs of innocence. That they were innocent, neither knowing good nor evil, is how we were before we ate of the fruit. So here there's a sort of sense of returning to that state of innocence rather than being, and see, the French Revolution suggested that we could not only free ourselves from the chains on our wrists, but we could also free ourselves from what other chains? Our mind, right? We're going to read a poem next week called London, and Blake's going to coin this phrase, the mind-forged manacles. Good?
Doesn't this almost perfectly intertwine with the Enlightenment, and how are the two compatible?
It is really sort of strange because the Enlightenment is happening right now as well. And it's really kind of odd because really Romanticism comes after the Enlightenment. Okay, so we are in the late Enlightenment. Just a good example, and you may have this in mind, Maria, is that Kant, Immanuel Kant, is a central Enlightenment figure, but he's also an early Romantic, and we'll talk about that later because he talks about things like subjects and objects, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But now the only strange one is Goethe, the famous German Goethe, who started as a Romantic and ended up as a classical person. Most people started as Enlightenment thinkers and ended up becoming Romantic. And Romanticism is in part a reaction against the Enlightenment. You're going to see in a moment that the Romantics, if they want to quote somebody or like make allusions, they don't make allusions to Pope or Swift or Dryden or any of what we call the Enlightenment Age of Reason thinkers. They skip over them and they go back to, well, who's the last sort of great Renaissance poet before the Enlightenment starts in England? You know who it is? The late Renaissance poet writing at the end of the 17th century is Milton. Okay? After Milton, we start to change. And so they go back to Milton, they go back to Shakespeare, but they sort of skip over the Enlightenment. So Romanticism is one of the first reactions to the Enlightenment, to the overemphasis on reason, the overemphasis on the city, and they want to start talking more about the countryside. They want to start talking about emotion, feeling, intuition, innocence rather than the building of cities and things. And we'll see this. And later in the semester, after the midterm, when we get to the Victorians will go back to the city again. So sort of, but you're right, they are happening very close to one another. Kant will write his Critique of Judgment about 1790, and that's when we'll start seeing the romantic side of him. Edmund Burke is in one sense an Enlightenment person, but he influenced the Romantics as well. So it is very strange, and that's why, traditionally we say Romanticism begins in the year 1798, because that is when Wordsworth and Coleridge published lyrical ballads we'll talk about. But again, Songs of Innocence and Experience are before that. The French Revolution is a little bit before that, or about that same time. So there are a lot of pre-Romantic figures that get us ready for it. So yeah, so Romanticism, we normally think of it as the first half of the 19th century, but it starts in the late 18th century, and there's that transition. And well, I'll show you some really clear examples when we get to Wordsworth, and he starts contrasting the Enlightenment ethos with the Romantic ethos back and forth. And we'll get examples of that. Oh, by the way, I wonder if any of you ever thought about this. Okay, Independence Day is what for Americans? July 4th, 1776, right? So that's our Independence Day. So that's the day we gained our independence from England. Thank you, okay? Now you see how romantic that is? Okay, it's an Enlightenment document, okay, but it's already looking forward to this idea that America begins her freedom when we say we're free. What, we didn't defeat the British, what was it, 1783 or something? It was a fairly long war, okay, not as long as the wars today. But I just wonder if you ever thought about that. And the French, too, they Bastille Day is when we got free. Well, no, that was the beginning of something that took a while. But again, that's this idea that once I say I'm free, in the March 25th of 1820 is Greek Independence Day, when the Greeks gained independence from the Turks. But the day they celebrate is not the day they actually got independence. It's the day they signed their documents and said, we're free and autonomous, and now we're going to fight to prove it. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but that'll get you into the Romantic mindset of, once I assert my freedom, I am free. And again, before the French Revolution went bad, it seemed like that was completely possible. And then what happened? The French Revolution went bad. It got more and worse, worse and worse, and it what we call the Terror stretches from 1793 to 1794. So, I mean, it's 4 years later. For a while, things really seemed good. It seems like, again, we're going to be free. Even the king and queen seemed to be happy, right? And then they arrested the king and queen, and then they killed them. And when they killed Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette, okay, that was the beginning of the Terror. I mean, it was really mean of them. They cut off the head of poor Kirsten Dunst. You got that, Kirsten Dunst?
Yeah.
Okay. You ever seen that weird Marie Antoinette movie?
It's an interesting.
It's strange.
The idea is definitely stolen from Baz Luhrmann's like Moulin Rouge and that.
I guess it, but she always does that. She's really good. It's what's her name? It's Sophia Coppola. Yeah. The thing about that movie is you're just about feeling like you're in 18th century France, and then she starts playing some silly music. But I mean that's her point. It's I don't know. It's interesting. Did you like the last one she made, Beguile? That was rather disturbing.
No.
That's actually a remake of a Clint Eastwood movie. Interesting. Anyway, movies. You watched a lot of movies this summer, I'll bet. She knows her movies.
But I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel more so.
Oh my
That's a
God.
good one.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My daughter's roommate forced her to watch the whole thing, but anyway. Buffy is like the reason why Christian critics started to look at like pop culture. That was like a huge thing 10, 15 years ago. All the Christian critics were writing about Buffy, even though Josh Whedon is an atheist. But kind of cool. Yeah.
He does think that
No, he does. He allows a lot of Christian themes.
Is the greatest story ever told, and he uses it constantly.
I mean, Neil Gaiman's an atheist too, but he's got all sorts of Christian stuff in a lot of his work. Just don't read his horrible short story, Whatever Happened to Susan. Hope you haven't read that. Oh, it'll destroy your love of Narnia. Don't read it. Anyway, okay. Now, during the Terror, okay, that is when they started killing off all the aristocrats. This is what Tale of Two Cities is partly about, right? And what method did they use to kill them? The guillotine, Madame la Guillotine, right? Now, some of you probably know that the guillotine was actually originally made as a humane thing. I mean, if you've got to be killed, that's the fastest thing, much better than being electrocuted or something, right? But I don't think anybody is going to use it anymore. But I mean, if you have to kill somebody, that's about as fast as you're going to be, right? But again, now we don't think of it. But in the beginning, it was supposed to be humane. But that's when they started killing the aristocrats, when they turned in on each other. Anybody know the famous name of the guy who oversaw the Terror? Yeah, Robespierre. And the Terror ended, by the way, when they put him to death. Okay? But the revolution turned on itself. It became parasitic. Then it turned around and started attacking the rest of Europe, including attacking Switzerland. And that was really hard for a lot of the older Romantic poets, because for people like Wordsworth and Coleridge, Switzerland was like the ideal romantic thing, right? Living on the mountain free, you're not being overwatched, you're hiding on the mountain and all that stuff. And when the French, they even attacked the freest place of all, that's when some of them started to turn away from it, started to say, what happened? How did it go sour? I thought we were going to free ourselves. All we ended up doing is becoming more savage and more cannibalistic almost. And so, in the shadow of the Terror, Blake revisited his songs of innocence and wrote a series of songs called the Songs of Experience. Okay? And we'll see as we go through them now in next class, a lot of the poems are about the same basic subject, but we've moved from a world of innocence into a world of experience, a world of exploitation, a world of manipulation, a world where everything sickens and dies. But there's something strange about what he means, okay? And if we can understand this, we're going to be setting off well on this whole semester. You can get this sort of key romantic notion, it will help us all. Okay. He eventually published them together as the Songs of Innocence and Experience, and then he gave it a subtitle, Shewing, which is an old-fashioned way of saying showing the two contrary states of the human soul. So what that means is innocence and experience, okay, are not so much external realities, they're internal realities having to do with the soul. So how will we explain this? Okay, well, we can make fun of Maria maybe. Okay, so we've got, let's say it's about 2 years ago, okay? And Amelia over here and Maria are both in my class, right? And it's Friday night, and it's pouring rain outside, just thunderstorm. And I send an email to all the students in the class, and I say, look outside, and you'll see that it's raining right now. I want you to sit down right now and write a poem about the rain. Okay, simple assignment. But before these two ladies got my email, they had very different evenings, okay? Amelia has just come back from the most expensive restaurant in Houston, right? And her boyfriend, the wolf guy, right? After waiting and waiting and waiting and fearing commitment and everything, finally pulled out that ring. He had to actually sell his soul to buy it, pulled out that ring and proposed in the most romantic way possible, okay? Then she comes home and she gets my email to write a poem about the rain. How do you think Amelia is going to describe the rain in her poem? Say it again?
Super happy and romantic.
Super happy. Okay, the rain is romantic. It's a universal baptism, wiping everything clean. What else? What other metaphors might she use?
It's like diamonds.
Oh, even better. Each individual raindrop comes down like a diamond. See, beautiful sort of stuff, right? Now, I'm sorry, Maria. I know you're tough, okay? Maria's had a little bit different day, okay? She's been dating this guy for 3 years, is madly in love with him. And just before she got an email, her boyfriend texted her to say, I'm sorry, but I'm breaking up with you. Actually, he's an HBU guy. So what he's actually texted is, I'm sorry, Maria, but God just told me to break up with you. Please don't do that. Don't do that, okay? By the way, though, ladies, you know what's a lot creepier? Is when the guy says, God told me to date you. That's a whole lot creepier. So watch out, okay? Watch out. So okay, now, how do you think Maria's a very good poet. So how are you going to describe the rain in your poem?
It would be very uncharacteristic for me to describe rain in my poem. I don't know. I think that it would probably still be a sort of, I don't know. I'm a weird person, so I would probably be like, oh well, it is what it is.
You bounce back. Like, you're right.
Incorporate Job or something.
Joe, there we go.
Right.
Might you? Here, I'm thinking of what Abigail said. Instead of the diamonds, it's knives hitting your back as they fall down. Dark. It would definitely be very Teutonic, right? Dark and stuff like that. Now, what am I getting at here, okay? If I were to ask them, what are you writing your poem about? They would say, it's a poem about the rain. Right? But what are they really writing their poem about, whether they realize it or not? Their experience. What's happening inside of them. To use Blake's terminology, when Amelia writes her poem, she is in a state of innocence. When Maria writes her poem, she's in a state of experience. And they might think that they're even objectively describing the rain, but what they're doing is they're taking what's inside of them, the state of their soul, and they are projecting it onto the rain. And I call this the externalization of the internal. It's in that outline there. Now, wonderful. What does that mean? You're taking what's inside and externalizing it. So it's not a poem about the rain, it's a poem about how you feel about the rain because of the state that you're in at any given moment, at that moment. Go ahead, President.
Would you say that Blake, with my very limited understanding, would you say that Blake views experience as like it's entirely a negative thing?
Well, we'll see. I mean, there are other ways of doing that where, it's like, it's a good thing we ate of the apple because now our eyes were open and we see, okay? And he will in later poems. But the poems we look at specifically, you'll see how experience is when the mind sort of sickens and it no longer trusts. It sees manipulation everywhere. It's the best example of the state of experience. How many of you have ever seen a famous painting? I think it was an etching originally called The Scream. That guy on the bridge and all that stuff. And again, it's just a painting of a bridge, but it's really a painting of a bridge where this man, who is in a sense in a state of experience, in a more negative sense, is projecting. It's got these. I can cut myself. It's projecting out like that. Actually, these are good because they're supposed to make you not touch your face. They said, right? So, I mean, like I said, from everything I've read, I mean, we should be careful with the hand washing and all, but everything I'm reading is saying that this is, vast majority is actually airborne. It's really, I mean, be careful and stuff, but, like they said, they were, I mean, it still can pass by your hand, but that doesn't seem to be the main way. So be careful with the hand washing and all, but it sounds like the airborne is what it is from everything I'm reading now. And we need to be careful, but anyway, I hope we get through this. Anyway, where was he? So there are ways in which experience is good, okay? But here it is, the soul has sort of turned in on itself, and it's lost its innocence, it's lost its spontaneity, lost its trust, lost its ability to see through the bad, to see the good that's on the other side. And we'll give you examples of this in a moment. But that's what they mean. So a lot of times, you've probably heard people talk about romantics being nature poets. Well, sometimes they are nature poets, but more often than not, they're not writing about nature per se, but they're writing about the way that they feel about nature. They're projecting onto them. And Romanticism is the beginning. It's a major shift in the arts, in all of the arts. Okay, because now I don't know how many of you have written at least one poem in your life. Let's try it. Okay, have any of you ever written a poem that wasn't in first person? Some, okay. Just generally speaking, in modern days, I think most people can't imagine writing a poem not in first person, because isn't that what poetry is? Isn't poetry a form of self-expression? Well, I think it is partly, okay. But after Romanticism, it's not so much about poetry as imitating the natural world or the universe or God or something like that. More and more, poetry becomes inward focused, and the whole point of being a poet is expressing myself. And we see this in painting. We see it in classical music. You've studied classical music. We see it, and I'm not saying it's all bad or good, but it is a huge change. And again, even religious poems, they become more and more internalized. Okay, talking about how I feel about God rather than praising God specifically. It's how I feel about God, and of course that becomes problematic, I think, in worship sometimes. This is what we mean by innocence and experience. Again, they're not external states. We're going to find out when we get to the poetry that some of the songs of innocence are actually in a world where there is a lot of bad things. But innocence is an internal perception. Do I perceive the world through eyes of innocence and see goodness everywhere, right? Or do I perceive the world? See? Maria, you're the only person that went from experience to innocence instead of innocence to experience, as long as you've maintained it and decide to see the world positively. And like I said, we'll see poems. This will become more clear after a while. But it is very difficult when that innocence is lost. It's sort of hard to go back. We've gone too far ahead. And the French Revolution, made it like maybe we can never go back anymore. Maybe we can never go back. But again, just get this in mind, and we'll see it again with Wordsworth and Coleridge. Innocence and experience are not external realities, but internal perceptions. We perceive the world through eyes of innocence or eyes of experience. Now, in the rest there, notice starting with number 11, 11, 12, 13, 14, I want to give you examples that predate the Romantics. That this is not an idea they necessarily came out of nowhere with. Okay? There's a famous saying in Paradise Lost, Book 1, because remember, the Romantics skip 100 years of Enlightenment thinkers and just go right back to the end of the Renaissance. And some of you who have read Paradise Lost will recognize the phrase, "The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven." Now, Satan says that, so it is satanic, right? But if you read to the end, if you actually get to the end of Paradise Lost and haven't hung yourself yet, when you get to the end, it helps to skip a bit. Oh, I am. I don't know why. Yeah, gruesome stuff. Well, as soon as I got that thing about, I just want to read it again. Let's check. They haven't changed their mind, have they? I can't believe it when I read that.
Holding out hope that they might be.
I don't know.
What?
Oh, yeah, you know about the hurricane?
It's
Yeah,
in life classes.
Yeah.
I wish we had classes.
I know.
I mean, like we do, but
Yeah, all classes, support services will shift online for the rest of the week.
See, normally they just cancel them, but since we have all this COVID stuff, we're prepared for online
Yes.
classes. So really, it's a blessing, right?
I guess so. That is actually a perfect example of what we're going to talk about later. It's called the Glad game. Who plays the Glad game? Pollyanna. Which one's more like Pollyanna? I guess you want Pollyanna. And we'll talk about it a little bit because we will defend Pollyanna. So don't worry. Have you seen the old version with Haley Mills?
I've not seen the version.
Oh.
I've read the book.
Oh, okay, the old version with Haley Mills is really cute. You used to see that. But anyway, they made a newer one that was pretty good. I saw, but not as good as the original one. But anyway, Pollyanna. We'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, but first, I want to see that there's some precedent for this. Now, Satan says that, but at the end, when I think it's Raphael, when he's talking to Adam and Eve, and says, if you follow the Lord and do this, then you may find a paradise within thee, happier far. So oddly, at the end of Paradise Lost, there is I'm going to call it a redemptive version of this, right? But Satan is being defiant and saying, no, the mind is its own place. It can take a heaven and turn it into a hell, or take a hell and turn it into a heaven. Of course, Satan has already taken heaven and turned it into a hell, and now he's living in his own hell. He doesn't escape from it, right? In fact, we find out later in Paradise Lost that Satan basically carries hell around with him wherever he goes. He is in a state of experience, and even if he went back to heaven, he wouldn't be happy. Any of you read Marlowe's Faust? Okay, Marlowe's contemporary of Shakespeare wrote a play called Dr. Faustus, and he's talking to Mephistopheles, who is Satan. And he says to Satan, where is hell? And he basically says, I am hell. I carry. Does anybody know who Pigpen is? Yeah, from Charlie Brown, right? Wherever he goes, he carries the dirt cloud around with him. By the way, if you see the new movie, which is pretty good, there's a moment where we see him clean. Oh, who is that? Oh my God, I don't know who that is. Anyway, it's pretty funny. But just like Pigpen carries his dirt with him wherever he goes, right? Satan, stuck in that world of experience, he can't. Everything becomes hell. He can't step 1 foot out of hell. So his defiant statement, sort of turns against him. But basically, that is the idea, that if you are in a state of innocence, truly in a state of innocence, you can be in a very bad situation, but still make it innocent. You can almost transform it. Right? But if you're stuck, if your inside is in a world of experience, even if you're in a beautiful place, it's going to be corrupted. Did any of you ever see a movie called La Vita è Bella? Life is Beautiful. It's an Italian movie with subtitles.
I really wanted to watch it.
You haven't seen it? It's great. Roberto Benigni.
Yeah.
He won Best Actor, even though he was in an Italian movie. Anyway, what it's about, we'll give you a little bit of spoiler, but anyway, he's Jewish, and he and his son are put in a concentration camp in Italy, which weren't quite as bad as the ones in Germany, but they were still concentration camps. And it's really a beautiful movie. The first half of the movie is a romantic comedy, how he wins over his wife. It's absolutely beautiful. Then the second half is darker, but what happens in the movie, and you really should see it if you get a chance, it's probably on Netflix or Amazon. No, it's not? Oh, okay.
That's why I couldn't watch it.
Oh, you looked. Oh, too bad. They come and go, some of these. But what he does is he decides, hoping that it'll be over, he is going to, even though they're in a concentration camp, he is going to maintain his son's innocence. And so, in the movie, he convinces his son that this is like a game. This is like, a super Boy Scout, camping trip to see who can survive, right? And the winner is going to get a tank, what he tells him. And amazingly, throughout the whole scenes that they're in there, he keeps that boy in a state of innocence. And when the boy's rescued, the American shows up on a tank. I won the tank. It's just beautiful. But it's in one sense, it's Pollyanna. It's just silly, right? But no, he actually preserves his innocence, making him believe that it's a game. It's a sort of Survivor, or something like that, right? A survival game. And what he's doing is keeping his boy in a state of innocence rather than pushing him into a state of experience, right? And again, I think we should all think very carefully about what we let our kids see. My example, I've told people this, you may not agree with me, but when my kids were very young, I let them see The Lord of the Rings. And they were like 6, because that's when it came out. And even though there's a lot of violence in there, I felt I could do that because it was meaningful. It was good and evil. I felt like it was not warping you, because it's showing you that there are things worth fighting for. But even when my kids were 13, I wouldn't let them see a movie about a serial killer, even if it was edited for television, because I don't want that crap in their head, okay? I was actually more careful about language than I was about violence, as long as I felt like the violence was meaningful, like Braveheart or something. But to me, bad language that's just an end in itself, it kind of corrupts the mind, I find that. You ever find that after a while, if you're watching too many movies with cursing, you find yourself, maybe I'm not going to do it out loud, but I mean, you ever find yourself, all of a sudden you're talking like that, maybe under your breath? It like gets into your head, and crazy stuff. Be a little more creative. English. Anyway, okay, so now, number 12. Has anybody ever heard of 2 poems by Milton called L'Allegro and Il Penseroso? Wonderful poems, maybe a little less known today. They're 2 mid-range poems, like, 150 lines each, kind of middle range. And L'Allegro means the happy man, the happy one, and Il Penseroso means the pensive, more like we would say the melancholy one. So Allegro is, and you ever learn about what are called humors? Sanguine, bloody, full of life. The other one's melancholy, right? He's got too much black bile. Like, well, what character in Shakespeare is melancholy? Oh, I didn't even think about that. You're right. He's really, really bad. Which better known character? You're right. Which better known character? Hamlet. Okay, but you're right. He's pretty bad too. But Hamlet, again, the melancholy, the brooding one, right? And both of these poems take place in the same exact pastoral setting, except that L'Allegro takes place during the day and Il Penseroso takes place during the night. And it's really amazing. It's got one of my students many, many years ago wanted to tease me, and he said, you know what? We don't really need the romantics at all. All we need is Hamlet and Paradise Lost, so we can just get rid of all the romantics. And that was painful, but there might be some truth to that. Anyway, in these poems, we get to see the same landscape and the same basic day, but from the point of view of 2 very different speakers, one of whom is in a state of innocence and one of whom is in a state of experience. Now, Milton's not using that language, but he's doing something that Blake was a big fan of Milton, and so he knew all of his poetry very well, and he's doing the same thing. So Il Penseroso, the L'Allegro guy, it's outside, it's wonderful, the sheep, the pasture, everything's innocent. The other one is at night, and there's bones everywhere, the dance macabre, right? Anybody ever see that real old Disney cartoon, black and white, the dance macabre and the skeletons.
Skeleton?
Have you seen it? Yeah.
I've seen that portion of it.
You see that portion? It's part of a short thing anyway. It's a cartoon short. But they're dancing and moving around. And it's really cool. So have you seen it? You've heard of it?
I've seen clips like on YouTube.
Okay, you see Cupid. It's really kind of fun. But so what I'm saying is there is a little bit of precedent for this in Milton, but there also is in Hamlet, right? You might recognize this line from Hamlet: "For there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Now this is not meant so much as a justification for bad behavior. It's saying that it's our thought that affects things. I didn't put it there, but there's another line you might say. Okay, if you remember, his friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, come to Elsinore, to the palace. They're going to spy on him. And when Hamlet sees his friends, he says, "Welcome to prison." "Welcome to prison, my lord?" "Denmark's a prison." And they say, "Well, then it's a pretty big prison," right? Because they don't understand what he's saying. And then he has this famous line where he says, do you know it, Maria? "Oh, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space, but that I have bad dreams." What is he saying? It's got nothing to do with size. It's got nothing to do with really the physical world at all. It's in my head. That's where he's mostly imprisoned, in his own mind. And if you're imprisoned in your own mind, then you're really in prison. How do you break out of it? And so you take that melancholy inside of you and you project it on the world all around you. And it's very hard to escape from that. Right? Now, Blake, about this time, wrote a real radical work, even more radical than the Songs of Experience, called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. And what he basically suggests is that heaven and hell are merely states of mind. So in this very strange poem, that's partly prose, partly poetry, very strange book, there's a scene where an angel and a devil actually are talking to each other, right? And the devil decides to take the angel on a trip down to hell. And they go down to hell, and it's absolutely terrifying, and he sees these giant spiders coming out and grabbing him, and all that sort of, And then the angel leaves and runs off, and suddenly it looks like a beautiful, sort of like a park with people on swings, and everything's wonderful, and there's a pond and all that stuff. Because as soon as the angel leaves, whose mind is, from Blake's point of view, bad, everything looks evil. But from the point of view of the devil, everything looks fine. It's a very, very... And he's got a line here that I quoted for you that's very famous, number 14. "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear as it is, infinite." Can you guess what rock group got their name from that saying? The Doors, apparently. I'm told that. I wouldn't know for sure. You can. I thought if anybody knew that, you would know that. But you're not a Doors fan, are you? Okay. But I'm told by rock and rollers that's where the name The Doors came from that famous phrase. But anyway, okay.
I was gonna guess that to be sarcastic, but wow.
Or maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
It's like, who, the Doors? Like, apparently that's true. All right.
They did a wild movie about the Doors. Did you ever see that?
I've seen bits and pieces of it, but they're a bit emo.
Very strange. It was, who directed it? It was that crazy guy, the conspiracy theory guy. Oh my gosh, I can't forget his name. Oliver. What's his name? The guy that did JFK and all that. Oliver.
Oliver Stone?
So, thank you. I couldn't get his name wouldn't come to me. He always makes conspiracy theory movies. He actually made that movie. It's wild. Some consider it a remake of The Bacchae by Euripides. Craziness, yeah. Wild. When you get a chance to read that, you'll be reading that pretty soon, whether you want to or not. You already did.
Yeah, for school stuff.
Oh, good. Okay. This is going to be an easy year for you.
I
Ready,
read
ready?
most of them.
Yeah, I read them already.
Messages.
Oh my gosh, crazy stuff. So, what does this mean? Okay, and again, this is something that was really big with the Gnostics, right? Who said that salvation is not, repenting and going to Christ. Salvation comes from secret wisdom or secret knowledge. And the way you say knowledge in Greek is gnosis. So Gnostics are knowers. And Blake became increasingly Gnostic, I think, in his later poetry, kind of strange and weird. He started very Christian, got a little bit crazy sort of. But this is the idea that we can make the world better if we just it's a little more like Eastern religion, almost like Buddhism, right? Where you retrain your vision of the world. The problem is with you and your perception of the world. And I mean, I think there's certainly some truth to that, okay? But Blake takes it to the extreme. The marriage of heaven and hell are merely states of mind. Now, there was a famous writer in the 20th century who wanted to answer Blake's book, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. So he wrote a book called, can you guess? The Great Divorce. That's why C.S. Lewis's famous book about heaven and hell has that really, really, really strange title, The Great Divorce. That's what he means. And he says it in the introduction, if you read it. He is saying, no, there's a divorce. Heaven and hell have nothing to do with one another. They're completely separate. Okay? He actually does say, in a way, hell is a state of mind because it's a turning in on yourself so much that you're all locked up. But heaven is the opposite of a state of mind. Heaven is reality opening up again and again and again, wider and wider. It's more reality. Now, the best way to explain all of this is to look at one poem by Blake, and it's called The Clod and the Pebble. So you'll find it, like I said, if you just put in Blake, The Clod and Pebble, you'll probably find it online. Or you can look on it. It's a very short poem. Let me give you the page number. Page 136. Now, this poem, The Clod and the Pebble, it actually appears in the Songs of Experience, in that part of the collection. But if Blake wanted to, he could have made this like the opening of the whole collection. Because if you understand this one poem, The Clod and the Pebble, you'll really understand everything that we're saying today about innocence and experience. Okay? So, I've been working on memorizing it. Love seeketh not itself to please, nor for itself hath any care, but to another gives its ease, and builds a heaven in hell's despair. So sang a little clod of clay, trampled with the cattle's feet, but a pebble of the brook warbled out these meters meet. Love seeketh only self to please, to bind another to its delight, joys in another's loss of ease, and builds a hell in heaven's despite. That's a scary poem. Okay. Now, I just want you to think about this, okay? If you hadn't actually read the poem, right, who would you rather be, the clod of clay or the pebble? Just speaking sort of objectively. Who would you think you would rather be? What's that?
The place the one saying love is better.
Well, I mean, don't think about what they say. Just okay, why would you rather be the pebble?
Because like
Yeah, you can't get trampled. You're hard. You can't be hurt. You're in a beautiful, clean place all the time. If you're a clod of clay, you're being stepped on. You can't even keep your own form. Yeah, you talk about being a doormat, is what you say, right? So in other words, objectively speaking, you might think that the clod of clay is in the world of experience and the pebble is in the world of innocence. But innocence and experience are not external states. Well, what isn't there an old? Is it Gilbert and Sullivan? Simon and Garfunkel. Don't you like them?
Yes.
Well, didn't they write the song "I'd Rather Be a Hammer Than a Nail"? Did they sing that? Maybe not.
No.
Who sang
They
that?
sang I Am a Rock.
I Am a Rock. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But do you ever heard
But
that?
YouTube did do 2 albums called Songs for Innocence.
Oh, okay, but I'd rather be a hammer than a nail. It's some old song. It's like an old folk song or something like that. Again, on the outside, objectively, certainly you'd rather be the pebble. But then we find out when we read it and hear it from their point of view that the pebble, even though he's in a beautiful place where it's always clean, all that sort of stuff, it's cool and everything, he himself is in a world of experience internally. And so he's projected out into the world and made everything bad. Whereas the clay, again, nobody wants that life. And yet because the clay within is in a world of innocence, everything's wonderful. Now, the the way we understand who they are and the way we understand what state their soul is in is by the way they define what word? Love, okay? For the clod of clay, what is love? Good, selflessness. What Greek word would you use here? Some of you know it. Agape love, right? You've probably heard that before. There's eros love, which is erotic love. There's philia love, which is friendship. And then there's agape, which is God's self-giving love. In Latin, do you know how to say agape in Latin? What do you know? That's the word caritas. And that comes into our language as charity. And that's why in the King James it says faith, hope, and charity. But unfortunately, in our day and age, the word charity has had its meaning shrunk, so it only means giving charity to the poor. Whereas originally, caritas is the same word as agape. It is self-giving love, giving of yourself. And that's why I think they're right to translate faith, hope, and love now. You'd be kind of confused. But charity in the King James is just a transliteration of the word caritas. And it's the same word. Go ahead.
Because charity is supposed to be like you're giving with no expectation of receiving.
Right.
But then that became just giving to the poor.
Right.
So then it loses its meaning. Instead, it's different.
It does. It's sort of like the word temperance. Used to be a wonderful word, but today all temperance means is no alcohol. Okay, because of the temperance movement, we've lost the fuller, Greek understanding of self-control, temperance. What's the word? Sophrosine is the Greek word, and we've limited the meaning of that. Right. So here, love is a movement out of the self. It moves out of the self. The best definition I've ever heard of love. What is the word for excessive and unhealthy self-love? You know what we call that? Narcissism. Okay. Love, agape love, is the ability to move out of the self. I mean, we're born naturally sort of narcissistic, egocentric when we're kids, and we think the world revolves around us, right? And then, as I like to say, we either grow up or we go to law school, right? And we continue to believe the world revolves around us. Anyway, you guys are a tough audience.
You just can't hear us laughing.
I can't even tell if you're smiling or not. This is so. There's only one thing I like about this. Have you been able to do this yet? I love going to the bank and withdrawing money with a mask on. I know it's my money, but there's just something really cool about that. All right, give me my money. I don't know. This is weird. This is weird. So, did you say that?
He likes that idea too.
Oh, you like that idea too? It's good stuff.
Go with the Lone Ranger man.
That's even better. And it's just hysterical. I mean, it's crazy stuff. Oh my gosh. Actually, this is not a joke. The ones I feel bad for is I saw a lot of Muslim girls on campus with the head covering and this covering. It's like, oh man, that is really tough. Okay, but I saw some girls earlier. But I don't know. This is crazy stuff. At least I can see wonderful stuff. I don't know if it's getting fogged up. You know what was happening with your brother-in-law Daniel? He was talking to me and he wears glasses. Does this happen to you, Preston? Your glasses get fogged up? Apparently, what you have to do is really squeeze that, because what's happening is you're breathing your nose and it's going up and fogging it. But anyway, it was really funny. He kept taking you off the wiping. Are your glasses fogging up?
They've gotten better.
Getting better? Yeah.
Yeah, some people, they'll be like, your glasses are fogging up, and I was like, Mike, I can see through my glasses.
You can see? Okay, but that's what they said. They said if you pinch it more closer on your nose, it may stop it.
Depends on the temperature of the room, too.
Mhm.
The closer the room is, the more it'll fog.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think about that.
For me right
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay. I feel like it's fogging up a little bit here.
Your glasses is
Cool.
on top of the fabric of your mask. So they
That
don't fog up.
Okay.
That helps. That's what you're saying. I think it helps a little bit. So anyway. Oh, okay. We're going to make it good. This is exactly where I wanted to end with this poem. So, okay. What is love for the pebble?
It's like self-pleasure.
Good self-pleasure. It's turning. I mean, it's the kind. I mean, I hope you don't have anybody like this in your family. But if you have anybody in your family who uses pity to control people and manipulate them, Preston seems to know at least some. You don't have to tell us who. So it's not your mom or something, grandma, right? Because again, sometimes people do use love and pity to control people, and that's what it is. Love is a sort of a weapon here. Now, is this poem psychologically true? Have you ever met a pebble in your life? that's like the pebble? Don't have to give a name, but give me an example. What kind of a person might be like the pebble? You ever met somebody that's, grew up very wealthy, had everything's fine, but they're what? Miserable, ungrateful, think everything's against them. You ever met people like that? Okay, they've got everything, okay, and they're unhappy and blaming and feeling entitled and all that sort of stuff. Have you ever met a clod of clay? A real clod of clay? Someone who's had maybe a tough childhood, maybe even been molested in some way, had a lot of bad things happen to them, all that, and yet they remain, they continue to believe in humanity. Maybe they're a little more careful if something bad happened to them, but they continue to believe that there is good. Because again, we are fallen, but we're still made in God's image, okay? We do have essential worth and value and a kind of goodness. That goodness can't save us, okay, in Christianity, but that does, we have goodness. We can do virtuous things. That's what Dante means by virtuous pagans, okay? They can do virtuous things. And again, these are people that, and you meet them and you're amazed. It's like they look at the world with such joy. They're kind and compassionate to people. Did you meet people like that when you were working in Moldova?
All the time.
Yeah. She was working with the human trafficking, helping. And does your husband have any passion for that too, or?
Some. He's not as involved.
Not as involved, but you're still involved? Have you been able to be?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. And it's just amazing when you meet people that can have nothing, and yet they're there. And then, okay, what we talked about, the famous book, who wrote Pollyanna? I don't remember the author's name. Nobody remembers. I remember the author. Pollyanna, she plays the glad game. Let's find out something to make this good and to make it happy and to make it wonderful. And what I love about Pollyanna is that her innocence and her joy and her gratitude start to spread to all the grouchy people. At first they don't, and again, if you're one of those innocent people and you come across a real cynic, they're just not going to believe you. They're going to think, all right, what do you want? Okay. Don't become that person. Don't have your, boyfriend or husband come home with flowers and you say, all right, what do you want? Don't do that. Don't fall into that. Okay, it's easy to fall into that. And again, what I'm saying is these are real. This is a psychologically accurate portrait, I think, of things. Okay, and just finally, and then we'll go. Is Blake alluding to a poem here? Is Blake making an allusion to another poem? Maybe from Milton? What did I read in Milton? The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. So he's directly referencing Milton in this poem. Okay, and again, even in the midst of hell, they were able to make heaven, and vice versa. Okay, so think about that as you start reading the Songs of Innocence and Experience, and I'll tape something tonight or tomorrow and talk about some of the poems. I won't go a lot, and we will survive this. And let's hope we survive the hurricane. I mean, maybe there's some chance they'll change their mind on Thursday. We'll see. But if not, like I said, I might do something.
They don't really change their mind.
Yeah, that's true. So, okay, good. And like I said.